Welcome back to the library, dear wanderers. Today we're gonna head back to Library Wing 1, the Hidden Nest. Back to the first Oak's shelf where we'll pick up the first work we see. This one was brought to the library by Dr. Everett Mann. Now without further ado, 81st turn, 7th year, 20th cycle, Erevday. From the Journal of Aframos Long Journey, Pilgrim. With notes by Avos Tor, scholar of Reeve Library. Erevday, 20th cycle, 7th year, 81st turn, 56th day in the trees. My temper remains frayed. I snapped at Torn again today. He refuses to keep still. We are camping in a cave for the expressed purpose of keeping him still while I see to his arm. If he keeps moving, he will injure himself again. If he will not keep still, I may need to tie him. When he is not ignoring my advice, he is talking. He found a stone deep in the cave that excites him. It has a shell impressed in it. I am sure that I would find it fascinating myself, were I not so worried that he might injure himself further. It is a spiral, something like the great shelled homes in Pella Vapel. He keeps talking about an ancient sea and millions of years of mud. And a footnote here. There have been a number of fossil finds in the Ravel Woods, most notably brought back by the Gripply Fxantha expedition. They are interesting, but ultimately such study is difficult at best, given the differences in strata throughout the woods, making it impossible to group fossils of different eras by age. That is all of interest, to be sure, but he does not take care of his arm, which I took great trouble to set. I may sit on him to keep him still. Indeed, at times I feel as though I am caring for a very young Conlon. I know that he is an adult, but I feel responsible for him when he acts foolishly. I will wait until he has been still a while, before telling him about the broken stone with the crystals within. And another footnote here, a geode perhaps. And with another page from the Journal of Aframos Long Journey, we move on to the next work. This one was brought to the library as the only work of Dirty Bit. Now without further ado, the Jelly Bean Incident. A long time before my discovery that my father had founded the Non-Lutherian Museum of Medicine and almost incomprehensibly separate from my first clumsy steps outside the reality box, I once met a leprechaun. In truth, I can't really claim to have met it, but his, and I gender it only reluctantly, presence was certainly made known to me. It was a brisk spring morning in the creaky old farmhouse of my youth. The green valleys, stretching out from the house in all directions, had peeked out over the previous weeks, and the only hint of the blankets of snow that had recently covered our world was the rushing of the ice-cold water in the gully just past the yard. My mother had gone out early, down the winding gravel road that barricaded my childhood from any semblance of normalcy, shopping for the milk and cheese and sweets that we couldn't supply ourselves. My father had conscripted me into the service of the farm, a label that he used proudly, but that was hardly descriptive of his hobby. The year before, he had arrived home one evening with a baby lamb which, after a symbolic protest from my mother, would supplement our livestock of 5 chickens, a pig, 3 barn cats, and a border collie, pushing the operation in his mind well into the territory of serious farming. There was a chill on our house from the spring dew, and while I sat in our kitchen eating a breakfast of jelly beans, an uncommon treat, my father stomped down the pine planks that served as our basement stairs. As he stacked wood into the ancient iron stove that would warm the house and fill our noses with the woody scent I associated with comfort, he quizzed me on my planned adventures for the day. The melting snow had left behind a sinkhole, way up on a wooded hill behind the house, and my young mind was wild with imaginings of the caves and treasures that I would surely find once I finished a hard day of digging. I excitedly left my snack and stood at the top of the basement stairs to ensure that he was demonstrating the appropriate level of enthusiasm for my discovery. He didn't seem quite as certain that pirates would have buried their treasure in a cave so far from an ocean, but once the entrance was uncovered, I was certain that he'd come around. The fire lit, he swung the heavy stove door shut and joined me upstairs. "You're probably going to have to dig through quite a bit of rock," he said, placing his soot-covered hand on my back and guiding me towards the kitchen. "There's a pickaxe in the garden shed you can use." "I bet I'll be through the top by this afternoon," I said excitedly. "By tomorrow, I'll probably need ropes and a headlamp." He grinned down at me, squeezing my shoulder gently. "Finish your nutritious breakfast," he chuckled. "It sounds like you have a long day ahead of you." My attention pulled back to a more immediate treasure. I let my eyes settle on the table where I had left a neat little pile of colored candy beans. It was the first time that I ever felt the glitch. The faint pull at the back of my neck, followed by the sensation of falling. Where the jelly beans had been, less than a minute before, sat a single gold coin. I spun to look quizzically at my father. "What's up?" he asked, the confusion in my eyes apparent to him. "What happened to my jelly beans?" I asked. "They were here a moment ago." "You ate them, I'd imagine," my father laughed. "I swear, they were right here," I said, confused, picking up the coin and inspecting it. It was chocolate, the kind wrapped in gold foil, common in stockings and at kids' parties. There was nothing uncommon about the thing itself. It simply hadn't existed moments before. At the time, my father joked that it must have been a leprechaun. When my mother arrived home later that afternoon, I told her the story, miming out my path from the table to the stairs, demonstrating my line of sight to the entrances and the only other person present, my father. She shrugged and said, "If a day goes by where you don't notice at least one unexplainable thing before lunch, then you aren't paying very close attention." At the time, I remember going through stages of disbelief. First, almost hurt that my parents seemed to have dismissed this impossible thing so casually. Finally, ending in puzzlement at how my father, and maybe even an accomplice, had orchestrated such a brilliant trick, only to barely acknowledge my wonderment at their success. Years later, when it became clear that my father was dying, I exhausted him with the philosophical. I was terrified that the world would forever lose his thoughts on anything that I didn't think to ask. The jelly bean incident, as I had come to think of it, was foremost in my mind in these weeks. "How did you ever pull off that trick with the chocolate coin and the jelly beans?" I asked as we lay across the hood of my car. He had flown to Lake Tahoe between chemotherapy treatments, knowing, I think, that it would be our last chance to draw beautifully linked figure eights down a mountain together. Skiing had always been our greatest connection, And something in both of us acknowledged that this trip was the big one. We had parked the car in a parking lot above Emerald Bay to watch the Lyrid meteor shower, which my father had claimed was near its peak. In 30 minutes of stargazing, we had witnessed a grand total of 2 falling stars, so the conversation had wandered somewhat from the cosmic. "Jelly beans?" he asked, confused. I told the story as I remembered it, complete with his explanation about leprechauns. "I don't remember that at all," he claimed. "Maybe it really was a leprechaun." Something about the adeptness and subtlety of the trick made me want for him to claim it. I wanted him to step effortlessly into his role as the sorcerer of my childhood and judge me, his son, finally worthy of the secret. Instead, I got a shrug, a laugh, and was, I imagining, the slightest suggestion of a wink. He was right, of course, to obscure his answer in a cloak of absurdity and humor. Even my framing of the question had not left any space for the truth. I sometimes wonder, had he lived for just a few more years, would he have deemed me ready for more than hints and nudges? I suspect that isn't how any of this works, but I'm still only just beginning to see. And with that short story of magic, wonder, and loss, we'll move on to our next work. This one brought to the library by William A.O. Now, without further ado, Place of Mind. It was dark, and the dark was peace, and the dark was rest, and the dark was safety. There was light, but only from the stars and the moon, and what they offered was more illumination than light. In the darkness were living shelves arranged in a circle like the stone monoliths of old. These shelves had books on them of many lives, and they too brought illumination. Under the light of the moon and the stars was a beast. Its coat was pitch black, like liquid shadow. And it was warm. But a threat would only see the white of teeth. The air was cool but not cold, as a perfect summer night was. And one could listen to the ambience of life beyond the woodland perimeter longer than one could live. It was dark, and the dark was peace, and the dark was rest, and the dark was safety. And in the dark one could see all the stars because they were alone. And with the end of that lovely little poem, we move on to our last work. This one was brought to the library by Rounderhouse. Now, without further ado, on Thieves and Punishment. If prostitution is the world's oldest profession, then theft must come in at a close second. From the moment sapient life conceived the concept of owning things, an equal and opposite concept was conceived, focused solely on the taking of things owned by others. As cave people squatted in their caves gnawing on roasted meat, Neanderthals from a different cave looked on and thought to themselves about how much nicer that venison would look in their hands. But as with all professions, it was only a matter of time before someone elevated it to an art form. Thieving as a profession and thieving as a craft are as different as night and day. Any schmuck with a crowbar and 2 hands can be a thief, but it takes a professional to do it well enough that they become a paragon of every aspiring con artist, cat burglar, and pickpocket. This tome records but a few of those artisans. The first thief. But we must always pay our respects to our forebears. The wonders of the library have peered back through the folds of time and discovered the identity of the first sentient being in the universe to commit the unoriginal sin. A single-celled organism on a now-dead planet. Unnamed, as a single-celled organism lacks the brain power to conceptualize names. While floating in the primordial ooze, it eventually collided with another single-celled organism. A small, dead protist was caught in the awesome impact. As the second organism spread its body to envelop the appetizing microscopic corpse, the first pulled away the food source before the other's eyes, if it had any, with lightning-quick speed. For the purpose of this tome, that single-celled organism was and forever will be the first thief. Robitaire, King of Thieves. The vast majority of thieves set their sights on the simple and easily attainable. Not so with Yor Robitaire. At the time, merely a lowly pickpocket in some forgotten city in the sands. He made a living stealing just enough food to survive and sleeping in abandoned minarets and shacks. Robitaire happened to be identical in all appearances to the reigning king. The king was a recluse hermit, said to have gone mad as a result of an intergenerational dedication to keep the power in the family. At his annual public speaking appearance, their eyes met, and in a fit of terror at this unwashed doppelganger, the king suffered a heart attack, which his doctors curiously believed was caused by an absence of mercury in his diet, and was put to bed until he could recover. From there, it was a simple matter for Robitaire to sneak into the palace and garrote him in his bed. The kingdom records show that after his heart attack, the king had a miraculous return to sanity, and declared that he would once again rule the kingdom and bring it back to prosperity. He began appearing in public, and to no small amount of pearl clutching in the court, actually speaking to his subjects. His rule was, by all accounts, just and prosperous, and even after his untimely death at the hands of a runaway elephant parade, the kingdom thrived. Though some of the more veteran palace guards continued to whisper stories about a body that the king ordered to be wrapped and burned in the desert far from the city. Steal an object and you are a criminal. Steal an identity and you are anyone. Emperor Bravis. Plic Bravis was the appointed governor of Traville, a small colony planet on the far reaches of its ruling empire. Granted only a small local legislation, the planet was regularly ignored and heavily taxed by the empire despite being an economic hub for the area. After a few years of this treatment, one dark night in his study, Bravis hatched a scheme with his legislation that he promised would end in nothing but profit for all of them. A few months later, Bravis brought before the local court a case. One of his co-conspirators, also his neighbor, had pushed his property line a ways into Bravis's, and Bravis demanded that the court make it right. The judge ruled in favor of the neighbor, pointing at an ancient bylaw from the more primitive days of the empire. Any land taken during conquest is the property of the invading persons until they relinquish possession of it. By the next morning, the planet was free. Overnight, the local militias had smothered the quartered soldiers in their sleep and taken control of the bases. Bravis was no fool. He knew there would be consequences. So, when the Imperial ships landed from orbit to put down the rebellion, he pointed to the ruling by the judge. The planet, he argued, had been taken by conquest, and as such, it was now the property of the people of Troville. The captains, confused at this legal tomfoolery, communicated to the seat of the Empire. Changing the laws of the Empire was a long and arduous process, and after their week-long emergency sessions, the lawyers of the Empire advised the captains to simply glass the planet from orbit and call it a day. But at that point, Bravis had rallied all the neighboring planets, also neglected by the Empire, to his cause, and the captains found themselves flanked by stolen Imperial ships. Months later, a peace treaty was hammered out between the Empire and the new Free Alliance of Rim planets. Bravis's ingenuity taught us that all you need to steal anything, even a planet, is to take advantage of the flaws around you and have the guts to press that advantage long after normal people would have quit while they were ahead. Yves Midday. While all these thieves are pioneers of the craft, Yves Midday stands out in a unique way. Not a single sapient being in the universe has managed to achieve the unprecedented theft that he pulled off, despite infinite attempts at it both before and after him. Midday pulled off the impossible, and for that he is recognized. The only individual to have stolen from the Wanderer's library itself. Theft of knowledge stands as one of the few actions considered absolutely intolerable in the library. Despite the strong warnings from the archivists and the imposing presence of the librarians, every so often a person or persons attempts to take something from the library. Sometimes the jailers, sometimes the book burners, most often some isolated fool unaware of the lengths the librarians will go to protect their precious books. The archivists gave up their eyes for knowledge of where every single book in the library is at all times. The moment one is stuffed into a bag or coat, they are aware and will alert the Dossets and pages. From then on, it is only a matter of time until the perpetrator is caught. The ways are the only entries and exits to the library. The librarians control the ways, and whoever controls the ways controls the library itself. Any way the thief attempts to enter will refuse entry, and the circle of librarians will tighten until the criminal is caught. There is no hiding, and there is no running. Anyone caught trying to steal from the library will find themselves trapped as a page or Dosset, working in the library until they've paid back their debt with interest. All of this goes to show the scale of the heist Midday committed. The secret of exactly how he evaded the long arms of the librarians has been lost to time, but theories continue to float in the air. Most accept that he manufactured a portable artificial way and escaped through it. But the second question of Midday's theft is what he stole. The librarians are unable to divulge this knowledge, and the archivists unwilling. Whatever it was, it is generally accepted that it was incredibly useful and powerful. After all, who risks their eternal soul for 4,002 ways to make his salt circle and 4 bonus methods? And the third question is the most asked. Where is Midday now? The pessimists maintain that he couldn't escape the librarians forever and is now sentenced to spend eternity serving the library. The optimists claim he is living the good life using whatever was in the tome he took with him. The realists say he is dead. But even if he is, his legend lives on in the hearts and minds of every thief in the ranks of the Wanderers. Conclusion. For every organization and law-abiding society, there exists a mirror society dedicated to ignoring the laws laid out by the first. The library is no different. This book only appears to those with the skills, talent, and intention to attempt to perform a heist of knowledge. Now that you are aware of your progenitors in the art of theft, you may set down this tome and step into the small doorway in the shelf that is open to your right. Welcome to the Thieves of Knowledge, Wanderer. And with that, we've come to the end of all our readings for today, dear Wanderers. Thank you very much for coming. It, as always, has been an honor reading for you. Good luck out there, and I hope to see you all next time. Preferably a little bit more on time.